Archaeologists using drones have discovered more than 25 geoglyphs etched in the coastal deserts of southern Peru near the Nazca Lines.
For over 1,000 years, they lay hidden that even satellites missed them. The Nazca Lines, Peru's most mysterious ancient wonder, were thought to be fully mapped. But now, Japanese researchers have uncovered dozens of new geoglyphs, and what they found is far more alarming than anyone expected. These aren't just more lines or forgotten animals. What they've revealed raises unsettling questions about the past and terrifying warnings about the future. As the dust clears, experts aren't celebrating, they're sounding the alarm. Because this discovery might not just rewrite history, it might doom what's left of it. Nazca of the Desert: Culture and Landscape. The Nazca Lines have captured global attention not just because of their scale, but because no one truly understands what they were meant to say. Etched into the silent desert plains of southern Peru, these massive ground carvings are only visible in full from the sky. Some stretch for miles. Others take the shape of animals, plants, or mysterious symbols. They were not accidental. Their placement and design suggest careful planning. Yet for decades, their origin and purpose have remained elusive. Who made these geoglyphs? And more importantly, why? What kind of civilization had the vision, the will, and the precision to turn empty desert into a message that could only be seen from above? The civilization responsible was the Nazca. They lived in southern Peru between roughly 100 BCE and 800 CE. These people settled in a harsh landscape wedged between the Pacific Ocean and the towering Andes Mountains. It was one of the driest environments on Earth. In some places, rain might not fall for years. Under such conditions, most cultures would have collapsed, or never risen at all. But the Nazca adapted. Not only did they survive here, they managed to build an organized and enduring society. Their survival was no accident. It was based on engineering, cooperation, and a deep understanding of the land. Their greatest tool was water. In a place where rainfall was unreliable or non-existent, water was life. The Nazca developed a system of underground aqueducts called puquios. These were spiral-shaped shafts that tapped into deep underground water sources. They brought water to the surface and directed it to fields and settlements. Many of these puquios still function today, more than 1,000 years later, showing just how effective and forward-thinking this system was. With this water supply, the Nazca were able to grow crops like maize, beans, squash, peanuts, and cotton. They also raised animals including llamas and guinea pigs, which provided meat, wool, and labor. Their agricultural economy made stable settlements possible in a place most would consider unlivable. Nazca society was not made up of large cities. It was organized into smaller communities spread across the desert valleys. Yet they were linked by shared customs, religion, and art. While the Nazca left no written language, their pottery and textiles speak for them. These items are decorated with vibrant depictions of animals, gods, and symbolic forms. Some show deities with both human and animal traits, suggesting a belief system that connected nature, life, and the spiritual world. These designs tell us that the Nazca worldview centered on fertility, balance, and the natural forces they depended on. Rituals likely shaped their daily life, especially when it came to food production and the struggle for rainfall. At the heart of their religious and cultural life stood a ceremonial city called Kawachi. Located near the Nazca River, Kawachi was not a residential center. It was a sacred gathering place filled with temples, mounds, and open spaces. Archaeologists have found musical instruments, masks, ceremonial vessels, and offerings buried here. These discoveries reveal a people deeply invested in ceremonial life. It is here, near Kawachi, that the first geoglyphs began to appear across the desert floor. This is no coincidence. Their proximity to this spiritual center suggests that the lines were more than just markings. They were messages or rituals expressed through land itself. These massive designs were not scattered at random. They were placed with purpose by a culture that saw the desert not just as a place to live, but as something sacred. But that raises a troubling question. How could an ancient civilization create perfectly scaled images that only make sense when viewed from the sky. And how have those shapes survived the centuries, untouched by time, hidden in the dust until now? The answer begins with the way they were built, and what that tells us about the minds that designed them. Building giants. How the Nazca Lines were drawn without seeing them. When you look at the Nazca Lines from above, the first question that comes to mind is simple but haunting. How? How could an ancient people, with no airplanes, no modern tools, and no way to see from the sky, create designs that stretch for miles and still hold their shape perfectly today? These shapes were not shallow scratches or random patterns. They were planned, executed, and preserved with stunning accuracy. And the tools they used were surprisingly simple. The ground in the Nazca Desert is made up of dark, reddish-brown stones that cover the surface, but just beneath those stones is a layer of pale, yellowish soil. The Nazca understood this contrast. They removed only the top layer of dark stones to expose the light-colored earth underneath. That's all it took. No digging, no building, no added materials. Just careful removal of surface gravel to make the designs visible. The simplicity of the technique is almost as impressive as the final result. Some of the lines they created run completely straight for several kilometers. Others curve into complex figures: hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, trapezoids, spirals, and unknown shapes that still puzzle scientists today. How did they keep these figures so accurate, especially without any way to check their work from above? This is where their use of tools becomes essential. They used wooden stakes to mark fixed points in the ground. These stakes, driven into the soil, acted as anchors. Then they used ropes tied between those stakes to guide their movement, allowing them to walk out long, straight lines, or shape perfect curves. Archaeologists have found many of these wooden stakes still in place today. Their presence gives us direct physical evidence of how the lines were laid out. But the Nazca did not simply guess these designs into the ground. Researchers believe they started with smaller drawings, perhaps sketched in sand or painted on pottery. From there, they likely used a grid system. This means they divided the smaller drawing into squares, then carefully scaled up each section, one square at a time, onto the desert floor. This method would have allowed them to enlarge images with accurate proportions. It is similar to techniques still used today in art and design when transferring sketches to large surfaces. Experimental archaeology has confirmed how effective these simple techniques can be. In modern recreations, small teams of people, using only stakes and ropes, were able to replicate full-scale geoglyphs in just a few days. No heavy machinery, no surveying equipment, just coordination, patience, and a deep understanding of the land. Here's what makes it even more remarkable. The Nazca never built platforms or towers to view these lines. There is no evidence that they ever saw the completed designs from above. So were these images ever meant to be seen in full at all? Or were they meant to be walked, experienced from the ground, or perhaps seen only by the gods they believed lived above them? Finally, the lines survived all this time because of the desert itself. The Nazca region gets almost no rainfall, winds are minimal, there's little erosion or human disruption. Because of these rare conditions, the pale soil they exposed has stayed intact for centuries. The lines are still visible today, much as they were when they were first made. But for all their precision and scale, these lines remained mostly hidden from human knowledge. That is, until modern aircraft flew over the desert and saw what the Nazca people themselves may never have seen, the full picture. And with that moment came a new wave of questions no one was prepared for: rediscovery and old theories. For generations, locals lived alongside the lines, aware of them but not seeing them as extraordinary. To locals, they were simply part of the landscape. To outsiders, they were invisible or mistaken for shallow scratches on the land. All this changed in 1926, when Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Chespe, a student of the renowned Julio C. Tello, was conducting a field survey in the Nazca region. While walking near the hills above the Nazca and Palpa valleys, he noticed long, shallow lines etched into the ground. At first, they seemed like old roadways or irrigation paths, but their unnatural length, consistent direction, and strange intersection patterns suggested something deliberate. Mejia Gespe began documenting the markings through notes and sketches, becoming the first scholar to formally record the existence of what we now call the Nazca Lines. He believed they were of pre-Hispanic origin, but without the benefit of flight, he could not recognize any of the figures or their full scope. He presented his findings at the 25th International Congress of Americanists in La Plata, Argentina in 1939, hoping to attract academic attention. Yet at the time, the lines were still viewed as odd surface markings with no clear importance. Their mystery remained locked into the desert floor, visible up close, but incomprehensible without a view from above. The breakthrough came in 1939, when American professor Paul Kosak boarded a small aircraft and looked down on the desert from above. What he saw stunned him. The scratches were not random. They stretched for kilometers, converging in long straight paths that pointed toward the horizon. As the sun set on the winter solstice, one line aligned perfectly with the setting sun. To Kosak, the answer was clear. The Nazca Lines must be a gigantic astronomical calendar. He declared the desert the largest astronomy book in the world. Kosak's theory grew even stronger when a German mathematician named Maria Reiche made it popular. She devoted her life to studying them. She measured, mapped, and defended them tirelessly. Her work was slow and painstaking. Without satellites or computers, she charted the geoglyphs by hand, often under the brutal desert sun. She lived in Nazca for decades, struggling to protect the fragile lines from damage and to convince authorities of their importance. To many, she became known as the Lady of the Lines. Reiche believed firmly that the geoglyphs were astronomical tools. She argued that the figures represented constellations and that the straight lines marked solstices, equinoxes, and celestial events. Her ideas found their way into textbooks and documentaries. For decades, her interpretation was widely accepted, and the world came to believe that the Nazca had created a giant observatory etched into the Earth itself. But as time passed and more geoglyphs were documented, cracks began to appear in the theory. Not all lines pointed to the stars. Many seemed to go nowhere at all. Some animal shapes, such as the monkey, the dog, or the whale, did not appear to have astronomical significance. Others formed geometric shapes with no connection to stars or solstices. The growing number of geoglyphs suggested a complexity far beyond a single interpretation, and what seemed like a neat solution had become another puzzle. The world had rediscovered them, but their true meaning still lay just out of reach. If the answers were not in the cosmos, maybe they were hidden in the ground itself. Water, rituals, and fertility. As the astronomy theory began to lose its strength, researchers started to look away from the heavens and focus on the desert itself. The Nazca lived in a desert where water meant everything. Survival depended on it, and naturally, water became central to their religion. Archaeologists noticed that some of the geoglyphs appeared to align with underground aquifers and canals. Others resembled the spiral shapes of the water canal. This suggested possibility. Perhaps the lines were part of rituals to summon rain or honor water deities. Excavations at Kawachi, the ceremonial center of the Nazca world, added weight to this theory. Archaeologists uncovered pottery, masks, and instruments, evidence of mass gatherings and elaborate ceremonies. It is believed that processions of priests and villagers walked the lines during these rituals. They may have carried offerings, played instruments, and performed dances, turning the geoglyphs into living pathways of devotion. The animal figures carved into the desert also made sense within this interpretation. The monkey symbolizes fertility in Andean cultures. The hummingbird was a bringer of rain, believed to dart across the sky as a messenger of renewal. The llama represented abundance and survival. Each figure was not a random decoration but a prayer etched into the land, pleading for life in the face of the harsh desert. This interpretation painted the Nazca Lines not as a scientific observatory, but as a living ritual landscape. The desert was alive with meaning. Every line and figure was tied to survival, agriculture, and spirituality. The people prayed not only with words, but with their footsteps, inscribing their devotion into the very earth they depended on. Yet, even as this theory grew stronger, a deeper mystery remained. Why were there so many figures? Why the sheer variety of shapes? from animals to geometric forms to human-like beings. The rituals explained part of the puzzle, but not all of it. It seemed the desert was speaking in many voices at once, and humanity was only beginning to understand the language. But all that changed when the Japanese made a shocking discovery: the Japanese breakthrough. For most of the 20th century, mapping the Nazca Lines was exhausting work. Archaeologists relied on long walks across the desert and on grainy aerial photographs taken from planes. The desert, however, stretched endlessly, and much of it remained unmapped. Many geoglyphs were so faint that even from the air, they looked like little more than natural scratches or random scatterings of stones. Researchers knew there were more figures hidden in the desert, but the vastness of the landscape and the fragility of the lines made it nearly impossible to identify them all. Each discovery came only after years of patient effort. Then, in 2022, a team from Yamagata University in Japan, working in partnership with IBM, brought new technology to the desert. They flew drones over the desert, taking thousands of high-resolution images. These were fed into an artificial intelligence program designed to spot patterns. Where human eyes saw only rocks and dust, the AI detected hidden shapes. The results were astonishing. The AI began flagging strange markings that no one had noticed before. Researchers then hiked into the desert to confirm them, walking across barren plains and rocky ridges to verify what the machine had detected. The work was exhausting. Over 1,200 hours of fieldwork were poured into the project as archaeologists checked site after site. Each time what had once been invisible was revealed as part of a geoglyph. Piece by piece, the hidden gallery of the desert began to emerge. By the time the project was complete, the team had identified 303 new geoglyphs. The discovery stunned the world. For decades, the known figures of the Nazca Lines had numbered in the hundreds. Suddenly, in one breakthrough, the total leapt to nearly 900. This was no longer the story of a few famous shapes like the hummingbird or the spider. It was a revelation that the desert was crowded with symbols, each one carved by human hands, each one carrying meaning. The new findings showed that the Nazca had inscribed far more into the earth than anyone had imagined. If so many figures had been overlooked for centuries, how much more was still waiting to be found? The Japanese breakthrough marked a turning point in the history of Nazca research. Technology had given humanity new eyes, and what those eyes saw changed the story forever. But the real surprise came when researchers studied what those new geoglyphs actually showed, and this rewrites history. What the new geoglyphs reveal. When the Japanese team unveiled their findings, people imagined that the new geoglyphs would be larger animals, more spirals, or new variations of the giant figures already famous across the world. Instead, what emerged from the desert was something no one was prepared for. The new geoglyphs were not massive. They were small, some only 5 to 20 meters across, so small that a person could walk past them without realizing they were part of a design. Yet their meaning was enormous. They opened an entirely new window into the Nazca world. Among the discoveries were human figures unlike anything documented before. Some appeared crouched low to the ground, as if ready for action or trapped in a moment of ritual movement. Others had arms raised high, frozen in gestures that seemed purposeful but still mysterious. Even more startling were the depictions of people carrying objects. These were not abstract figures. They were recognizable humans caught in the middle of specific actions. For the first time, it was clear that the Nazca Lines captured more than animals and geometric forms. They also portrayed human activity, and with it came disturbing truths. The most unsettling images were those of priests holding severed heads. Archaeological digs in the Nazca region had already uncovered evidence of ritual decapitation. Trophy heads, as they were called, were often buried with the dead or used in ceremonies. Many skulls were found with cords threaded through them, suggesting they were carried or displayed. These practices were long known from artifacts, but to see them etched directly into the desert floor was shocking. It confirmed that ritual violence was not just a hidden practice, but something the Nazca chose to memorialize on their sacred canvas. Other geoglyphs revealed groups of llamas arranged in lines, marching across the desert. Their presence in the geoglyphs may have symbolized abundance, trade, or journeys across the land. These smaller figures were often placed near ancient trails, suggesting they served as markers for travelers moving through the desert. Instead of being invisible to those on the ground, these geoglyphs may have been designed specifically for people walking past them. They could have been territorial markers, clan identifiers, or messages left for those moving across the arid plains. The diversity of the new geoglyphs destroyed the old idea of a single meaning. Before, they were either calendars, water rituals, or religious offerings. But the new discoveries proved that the lines could not be contained within one explanation. They were religious and social. They were practical and symbolic. They represented violence and fertility, identity and survival. They were everything the Nazca were, inscribed into the land itself. The Japanese discovery was more than just the addition of 303 new geoglyphs. It was a revelation that the Nazca Lines were not a single mystery to be solved, but a complex story to be understood. The desert was no longer whispering only of gods or stars. It was telling the full story of a civilization, one line at a time. But with these revelations came bad news. The geoglyphs are more fragile than ever. Why it's bad? Excitement over the new discoveries quickly turned into alarm. Many of the newly identified geoglyphs are so faint that they can only be seen by drone or high-resolution aerial images. Unlike the well-known hummingbird or spider figures, which have survived for centuries thanks to their size and visibility, these smaller and more fragile figures exist on the edge of erasure. A single footprint, an off-road vehicle, or an unexpected rainfall could permanently destroy them. This is not a theoretical concern. It has already happened. In 2014, Greenpeace activists staged a protest at the Nazca site during a global climate summit. They laid cloth banners spelling out an environmental message near the hummingbird geoglyph. In the process, they walked across the fragile desert surface, an area strictly protected by law. When the banners were removed, the footprints remained. The desert crust was permanently disturbed. In attempting to raise awareness about environmental protection, they had damaged one of the most iconic environmental heritage sites on Earth. The backlash from the Peruvian government and global archaeologists was swift and intense, but the damage could not be undone. Just 4 years later, in 2018, a truck driver veered off the Pan American Highway and drove across part of the protected Nazca site. His tires carved deep ruts through the soil, destroying lines that had remained intact for more than 1,500 years. Authorities arrested him, but the deeper issue was clear. The site lacked proper barriers and signage to prevent such accidents. These events exposed how vulnerable the lines really are, not just to malice, but to neglect and oversight. Beyond these high-profile incidents, quieter threats are growing. Farming communities are expanding their reach, pushing fields closer to the geoglyph zones. The demand for food and land continues to rise, and satellite images have revealed new encroachments near previously undisturbed areas. Tourism, though economically essential for Nazca and Palpa, brings new risks. Visitors often fail to grasp how easily a misstep can scar the ancient desert surface. And with drone tourism increasing, unauthorized aerial footage and landings are becoming harder to regulate. Climate change presents perhaps the most unpredictable danger of all. The Nazca Desert has remained dry and windless for centuries, preserving the lines naturally. But shifting climate patterns are beginning to change rainfall behavior in southern Peru. If sustained rain begins to fall in this region, the exposed soil could be washed away, and the lines that have lasted for millennia could vanish in a matter of hours. The implications are stark. Without immediate and ongoing protection, digital documentation, and global cooperation, the Nazca Lines, both old and newly discovered, face a future in which they may only survive as images on a computer screen. The desert has preserved them for 1,500 years. Humanity might erase them in less than 50. Yet the danger is not only physical. For decades, scholars and the public alike have tried to force the Nazca Lines into narrow categories. They were described as calendars, or as religious offerings, or as mere decorations. By doing so, we reduce the complexity of the Nazca culture to a single idea, taking away the richness of what the lines truly represent. The real shock is that we were wrong all along. The Nazca Lines are not one thing we tried to force them into. They are many things. They are not only religious messages carved into the earth to please the gods. They are not only astronomical alignments pointing to stars or solstices. They are not only pathways for ritual processions or markers of underground water. The smaller geoglyphs uncovered by drones and artificial intelligence shattered the old illusion of simplicity. They showed priests carrying severed heads, llamas marching in lines, humans crouching or raising their arms, symbols of fertility and scenes of daily life. This was a vast record of who the Nazca were. The desert was not just their environment. It was their history book, their temple, and their stage, all in one. The desert has corrected us. It has reminded us that human history cannot be reduced to a single theory or one neat interpretation. The only question that remains is whether we will protect this fragile canvas before it is too late, or whether the voices of the Nazca will be silenced forever. What do you think about this discovery? Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.